Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Introductory lecture by Lisa M. Kendrick. You may have heard of this story's inception. It was a dark and stormy night, of course. But really, it was the bout of dreary weather which inspired a group of people to sit by the fire in their villa and see who could tell the most scary story. Of the writers present were Lord Byron, Dr. Polidori, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and Mary Wollstonecraft, soon to be Mary Shelley, the daughter of the same name. They were all friends, and because of their very liberal lifestyles, they found themselves needing to escape from England often. They vacationed together on Lake Geneva, and when bad weather kept them indoors, they chose to share scary stories. This was a really popular activity of the time, especially, believe it or not, it was a tradition for a couple of hundred years during Christmas holidays in England. Anyway, Dr. Polidori's story about a vampire, The Vampire, was published later as a novella. Lord Byron also wrote about a vampire, fragment of a novel, but he never finished it. Percy Bysshe Shelley, as far as we know, didn't contribute a scary story, but his soon-to-be wife Mary began Frankenstein. Although Mary may have begun the story as a bit of fun, it became much more than frivolous entertainment, both as a piece of literature and on a personal level for Mary Shelley. You see, bad rumors and events followed the Shelleys. Percy had married young and had quickly tired of his wife, despite the fact that they had two children together. He met Mary via her father when she was only 15 and he was 20. Mary's father did not, for obvious reasons, approve of their affair. He forbade them to see each other, which sunk Percy so low he attempted suicide. This precipitated in 16-year-old Mary running away with Percy to the European continent where they remained, including this stay in Geneva, until Percy's wife committed suicide by drowning when Mary was 19 in 1816. One of Percy's daughters died of natural causes not long afterward, and Percy married Shelley, bringing in his remaining daughter to be raised with his only surviving son with Mary. One son died in infancy, and Mary miscarried another. Percy Shelley drowned in a boating accident, in that he went boating on a lake by himself and neither he nor the boat was ever found, 6 years after their marriage. Granted, Mary Shelley had already completed and published Frankenstein in 1818, 2 years after the fateful Geneva stay, but much of these tragedies struck while she was writing, and it is considered to have played a role in a novel which centers around the meanings of life and death. Unlike the evolving figure of Dracula, Frankenstein's monster was truly an abominable creation. In the 19th century, there was a huge buzz, pun intended, around the ideas and uses for electricity. Many scientists of the day did believe that electricity could be used to bring the dead back to life. Think crash carts, which use electricity to shock a person's heart back to beating, but on a whole nother level. Mary wove in these ideas about electricity and created not one, but I would argue 3 monsters. Dr. Frankenstein himself, a compulsive and obsessive character who does terrible things to create his creature and then abandons him. Frankenstein's monster, who is born looking like a monster, but whose kind spirit becomes cruel and murderous because of his treatment by his creator and humanity in general. And Frankenstein monster's bride, a second being created under duress from the monster, but whom the doctor refuses to complete. This novel ends up questioning not only life and death, but the nature of love, loss, and humanity. The story begins and ends with a series of letters in the present of the novel. Then the bulk of it is told with the narrator as Dr. Victor Frankenstein. He was a university student who became obsessed with discovering the secret of life, then uses body parts and electricity to create that life. However, once he brings his creature to life, he is horrified by what he has done and abandons it immediately. The monster is childlike and innocent. He wakes up alone. He's terrified. He struggles to survive, to educate himself, and to be loved. When he finds no acceptance, he discovers who his creator was and swears vengeance on everyone that Victor loved. The bulk of the novel follows Victor as he experiences his own issues with the life he has created, suffers the consequences of abandoning and having created his creature, and is forced into servitude for his creation, eventually seeking to destroy his own monster. Victor Frankenstein is the doomed protagonist, theoretically, and narrator of the main portion of the story. He is studying in Ingolstadt, and Victor discovers the secret of life, creating an intelligent but grotesque monster from whom he recoils in horror. Victor keeps his creation of the monster a secret, feeling increasingly guilty and ashamed as he realizes how helpless he is to prevent the monster from ruining his life and the lives of others. The monster is 8 feet tall, hideously ugly, and the sole creation of Victor Frankenstein. He is intelligent and sensitive. The monster attempts to integrate himself into human social patterns, but all who see him shun him and indeed hunt him. His feeling of abandonment compels him to seek revenge, and he becomes a true monster. Robert Walton is an Arctic seafarer. Again, something that was contemporary to the era, so was included as the present tense. In any case, this guy's letters open and close Frankenstein. Walton is exploring the Arctic and he picks up a bedraggled Victor Frankenstein off the ice, nurses him back to health, and therefore hears Victor's incredible story. He records this tale in a series of letters that are addressed to his sister, Margaret Saville, back in England. Henry Clerval is Victor's boyhood friend. He nurses Victor back to health after discovering him sick and confused on the streets of Ingolstadt after running from his creation. After having worked unhappily for his own father, Henry begins to follow in Victor's footsteps as a scientist. His cheerfulness serves as a foil to Victor's dark and morose personality. Elizabeth Lavenza was an orphan, 4 to 5 years younger than Victor, whom the Frankensteins had adopted as a young child. Victor's mother had rescued her from a destitute peasant cottage in Italy and cultivated the idea that Elizabeth and Victor should eventually wed. Elizabeth embodies the ideal passive woman of the time as she waits patiently for Victor's attention. William Frankenstein is Victor's youngest brother. He was doted upon by all of the Frankenstein family. The monster strangles William in the woods outside Geneva in order to hurt Victor for abandoning him. William's death tears Victor apart and causes another. Justin Moritz was another girl adopted into the Frankenstein household while Victor was growing up. Justine, as William's key caregiver, is blamed and executed for William's murder, even though it was clearly Frankenstein's monster who was the murderer. One theme at the center of this novel is the idea of dangerous knowledge, that idea of taking progress or technology too far. Victor attempts to go beyond human limits and to access the secrets of life in a godlike way. Likewise, Robert Walton is attempting to surpass human exploration by endeavoring to reach the North Pole. Nature is also a part of this, the sublime natural world. As embraced by the Romantic era, It is a source of unrestrained emotional experience for the individual and offers characters the possibility of spiritual renewal despite everything that's going on around in the novel. We also have the idea of secrecy and how secrets can be devastating. Victor conceives of science as a mystery, as secrets that he can discover, and then he jealously guards them instead of seeking help. He is obsessed then with destroying this monster, with keeping it a secret, except for, of course, his revelation to Walton and therefore us, the reader. There's also the idea of feminine or of women and how they should be for this time period. The novel is written by the daughter of an important feminist, and Frankenstein is, however, doesn't really contain strong female characters. One could argue that perhaps that is a part of the issue. The women here are very passive, and things do not work out well for them. There are quite a few symbols in the novel. The key ones are texts. So, Frankenstein, as many of the time, are overflowing with different kinds of texts: letters, notes, journal entries, inscriptions. All of these fill this novel. Sometimes they're even nestled inside each other. The idea that they allude to other things and to the fact that language and the written word is the source of knowledge. Indeed, the monster seeks this very thing. We have the monster itself, or the idea of a monstrosity, and death and body parts, things like that. They all represent this abnormal conscience created by Victor. In many ways, the monster is that hidden monster inside Victor. It is a representation of his ego, of a psyche which experiences the external world or reality through its senses and then has to govern its actions. And of course, in the monster's way, he governs it in a different way than Dr. Frankenstein. Yet, Dr. Frankenstein himself had issues with reality. We also, of course, have light and fire. This symbolizes knowledge, discovery, enlightenment. We have the darkness and coldness. Both things represent hidden passageways or barrenness, no way to move forward, yet this struggle to move forward despite these two things clawing at both Dr. Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster. And then a necklace represents the idealized maternal figure who suffers a tragic fate. As we said earlier, our women are passive and they suffer for this. What is the takeaway for all of this? That would be a lot to unpack in such a short video, but I would argue that there are two key ideas here. One is that all humans need companionship. We are social creatures, and life is too much to bear alone. Secondly, there is this idea about the monster inside. Frankenstein's monster has become iconic. He is what happens when humans play God, when one gives literal life to one's own ego. When Dr. Frankenstein is faced with birthing a second monster, a bride for his original monster, he has learned his lesson finally and refuses.